Hey guys, welcome back to a brand new studio video. I want to thank everybody first for watching the other two, Ready to Rumble and Novel. Got so many good comments, and we were thinking of just doing this monthly. Well, usually it's kind of hard because of touring, but I can tell you this, we have a new one right here with the remix for the Chainsmokers. We were kind of blown away by the amount of comments, and I will try to answer most of them, at least the ones that were asked the most frequent. Today I wanted to talk about the remix that we've done for the Chainsmokers, and also about how to deal with the remix parts that you get. Let's start with the remix parts first, because that is really important for the song. So usually when you get remix parts, for example, for a song that's a different speed than the speed that you usually work at, like the song of the Chainsmokers, Young, is like 105 BPM, which is much slower than the sound that I usually do, which is 125, 126 BPM. You really have to convert your parts in order to make it fit to your sound. Or you can slow down the entire remix, but then it's going to be really hard to play. So I really wanted to play the song because I really loved it, and I wanted to make sure that the song would still fit in my sets. So therefore, we converted the parts from, let's say, 105 to 120, and the final result of the remix was 120 BPM. And then when I play it out live, I still pitch it a little bit more with the Pioneer CDJs, or I edited in Logic, but therefore I definitely made sure that it still feels like a Nicky Romero remix without losing the identity of the song. So how do you do that? Well, first of all, I use a different software package for stretching, which is called Studio One. But it doesn't really matter. The algorithms are a little bit different in Ableton, in Logic, in Cubase. It's really your preference, and I think the one in Studio One sounds best. So the converting of all the parts I've done already in Studio One, just because I wanted to make the video as compact as possible. I tried to do that in a different video for you. But this is the parts that were already stretched from 105 to 120 BPM, and I stacked them up right here, and I'll give you an example how that sounds like.
Young, we were so young when we thought that we knew how to love. Fought about anything, everything that did dysfunction.
Well,
but we just gotta own that shit.
As you can tell, like, the vocal already sounds pretty stretched, so it definitely already got, you got some quality loss here, but it's inevitable. It's kind of hard to not have that on a song with such an amount of stretching, but still I think it sounds pretty okay, especially because the rest of the part sounds pretty natural, so it blends in nicely. For the ones and for the people, as there is a lot of difference in skill for the people that are watching. Some of you might just start out as a producer, and some of you already have releases and maybe even have your own label. So I try to be a little bit in the middle of everything, so it's kind of understandable for everyone. And if you want to know something about the plugins that I use and something about the master plugins that I use in the other two videos, and the links are in the screen right here, I'll tell you more about the plugins that I do. But for this remix, I really wanted to talk about the parts and about the global structure of the song. So I'll loop you through some plugins and some sounds as well, but this I think is the most important thing. So what do you do first? Well, first of all, if you look at the structure of the song, you really want to determine the verse, the chorus, what kind of sounds do we have in the package, and what do I want to use. As I really loved most of the parts in the song, I took some of them and I made the remix around it. And the most important, and the thing that really caught my eye on the parts of Young, was this part. And it's really a sort of a vocal that's chopped up, and that kind of already made the song, because there was only one direction to go to when I heard this. I was like, this has to be the main melody. So I kind of built everything around that sound, and if you combine it with the sounds that I've made, then it's gonna sound like the entire thing. So a lot of people asked online already, like, hey, why is the remix, comparable to other remixes that are done for young? I think because a lot of people took these kind of parts to build their song around it, and the song kind of forces you to use these like these sounds right here for the drop. So I thought I wanted to use them and build some synths around it. Well, the verses right here are gonna sound like this.
We were so young when we thought that we knew how to love. Fought about anything, everything that did dysfunction. But we just gotta own that shit. Don't let it go like this.
And what's going on here? I'll break it down really easy for you. It's background vocals.
And almost fought your father when he pushed me in.
It's a bass. I'm not even sure if you can hear it because it's pretty low. We have the lead vocals.
We both know I go too far, like when I wrecked your car.
We have some pianos. And we have some chops. And then there's some pads here. So I took those elements of the song to use them in my remix, and the rest of it I just got rid of it because it didn't fit in my version. Like the drums and most of the effects I tried to make myself. I really want to give it up to the Chainsmokers for giving up the atmosphere in the song, because it really sounds great. The atmosphere in the entire song is absolutely stunning, and without that my remix could never be what it is right now. So what did I do after? So the stretching is done. Everything is 120, as you can see maybe here on my screen. Everything is 120 now, so I only have to worry about my own sounds and making them work together, making them blend together. And that is the most interesting part, because you really want to sound, you want the sounds to glue together without having the feeling it's two different worlds, like the remix parts and your part. So that is something that is the hardest thing to do on the remix. So you really want to make sure it sounds like one entire production instead of two different ones. So what did I do? I first determined what I wanted to use. Well, that was pretty obvious because it was literally this. As you can hear, it's already playing on the drop, and I'll play you the entire drop so you can hear a little bit how that sounds like. So it's pretty funny because a lot of people said like, hey, how do you make your own synths? Well, obviously it's never my own synths. I wish it were. I wish it was, but it's always third-party synths that I use. But we do use our own plugins a lot, and I use most of the time. I use the word we because I really want to get the word out that it's never only me. Like there's a lot of people working for Protocol Recordings and Protocol Studios that help me out. Big credit to Jorik and Nils for helping me out with this one as well. So it's always we, even though that I try to work on my signature sound the most, of course. But yeah, I like to share the credits. Anyway, what's going on here? As you can see, all the green parts here are my own synths. So it's not only their parts. It really is the green part here that works together with the orange part right here. Oh, right here. That makes the main sound. Let's see. I'm going to play it together. Because the glitchy sound that you hear on the drop is not coming from their parts. That's actually my parts, because I really wanted to sound a little bit like the song M83, Midnight City. That atmosphere I love a lot, and especially the Eric Prix remix. So that inspired me to kind of make the synths glitch. And that would sound like this. Let's see if I can play them together. So if I would go about one by one, it's really a lot of stuff. As you can see, to make the sound, it's about 6 different ones, maybe even 7 different layers playing to get that thick, that warm overall sound. And then it's also the chords that are playing that fills up a lot of the frequency aspect in the song. But it's really this, and it really is the Chainsmokers parts that inspired me to do it this way. And what is really interesting is that I took the melody here. Let's open it up real quick. And as you can see, it's playing a it's not a chord, but it's definitely not a single note either. It's playing 2 different notes in the end, and that creates that really cool atmosphere. It's right this part. And that really gave a cool atmosphere to the song. Also, that created a little bit of extra that was not there yet, in my honest opinion. And what kind of VSTs were used? Well, it's literally Contact. I really love working with Contact because it has a lot of good sounds and you can do a lot to it. I used the same orchestral in Toulouse for the ones that want to know. And then you put it on staccato here and you get that sound a little bit for in the break and in the layers. Same goes for Symphonica. All those sounds came all from Contact. There's a lot of Spire. I really love this synth because it's pretty new. But there's a lot of good patches for it available for the ones that just started out, and if you don't want to start something from the beginning, if you want to get a good sound and you want to get it going quickly, there's a lot of good patches for Spire. Well, there's a Contact again, probably for the upper layer. When I use strings in the drop, I like to use a lower octave and a higher octave, so it works well together, and it fills a lot in the frequency aspect of the entire song. There's Saws playing. And that's Serum. So it's really a nice blend of all different synths. It's not just Nexus, it's not just Silent. And really, you know what it is? All those sounds are not really special at all. You can basically make them with any synth. Just every synth has its own, like, I almost want to say atmosphere. It's a little weird maybe, but it has its own little sound, and it has its own little edge, and it has different filters, different LFOs, so it's always going to sound a little bit different, but most of the sounds can be done in any synth. It's just really what you prefer to work with. There's a Silent playing here, so it's just, yeah, it's like a nice multi-culty synth group here. And the thing that's the hardest with stacking those synths is making sure that everything plays in its own spectrum. So one is playing a higher octave, one is playing a lower octave, and it's always playing around with the octave to see which one fits the best. So that for the synth group. We're going back to the parts, because what's playing of the original parts in drop? Let's see. It's a real bass. That's really interesting because it's kind of laggy and it's kind of slow, but it really gives a lot of atmosphere to the song. If I would play it out for you solo. And what's really important if you're going to use parts of the remixes, especially if you didn't do your own sounds. For example, I don't really know how this bass is being played. I don't know the rhythm of it, so I really want to make sure that it does not bother the rest of my mix. Therefore, I do a heavy sidechain compression. And as you can see, for this one I use my own plugin, which is called Kickstart, which you can get online if you want to. And it really makes sure that there's nothing else playing at the moment of the kick, because otherwise it's gonna be a little bit messy, and you want to keep it as clean as possible. So just do some EQ to make sure that nothing under 220 Hertz is playing, because everything under the frequency of 220 is already being played by my own plugins and my own bass, so I don't want to interfere with all the other sounds. Then there is a siren, which is a really cool sound. Same goes for this sound. Just put a kickstart on it and it's really easy to get it fixed and to blend it in your mix. So just like those three parts are playing in the drop. That's the only thing of the remix parts. But they're really, really important because they really set the atmosphere of the song. So other few things. We're going to the second breakdown here. And this is really interesting because this part really got my eye. Playing the vocoder. I'm calling you up, you tell me so, say what you want, with irony. Well, also this is really of the original song, but it originally sounds like this. I'm calling you up, you tell me so, say what you want, with irony. And I found that it was a little bit too low, frequency-wise, to use it. So I just pitched it up to make sure that it sounds a little different and it's a little easier to understand. Well, it's still kind of hard to understand as it's vocoded, of course, but it sounds a little bit better in the mix. I'm calling you up, you tell me so. And there's many different ways to pitch something up. I used the pitch wheel here. It's a pretty buggy plugin, honestly, but it sounds just really good. You can use the sound shifter pitch as well, do the same thing, but I'll show you it sounds a little bit different. I'm calling you up, you tell me so, say what you want, with irony. I'm calling. So it's really what you like yourself, and you know, both plugins do the same thing. They both have their own sound to it. And you can use them, you know, if you really want to do it right, and if you really don't want one plugin to work too hard, then you can also choose to pitch one and +6 and the other one +6, which multiplies to 12 as well. So you can do that too. I'm too lazy to do so, but you can. All right. So the vocoder part was a remix stem as well. Then what else is playing here? We were caught up in the high, it was better than drugs. Too hard to see that it would only do destruction. There's an important part here which I did not color right, I can tell, but it should be orange. Is the guitar. And the guitar, especially when it's playing pretty slowly, is really, really hard to stretch because it's so advanced and there's so many sounds going on that usually the algorithm of the software doesn't really know how to stretch. So this took a long time to get it right, and sometimes it takes a lot of manual different adjustments to get it sound good and to get it sound right on the beat and in the swing. So but again, Studio One does a great job at it, so I would definitely recommend that to stretch. But Logic can do it too, and if you want to do it with Logic, just use here, there's a flex tool which you can add on top. It's a little button here, and then you can flex it here your own way, and you can really give the own quantize that you want to. But I would only recommend that for BPM changes of, let's say, 3 BPM max. Other parts of the song. So what else is interesting? What I really like to do, I don't want to call it a trick necessarily, but is making a beat. It's basically the beat that's already playing in the drop, but then with a heavy filter on it to introduce that it's going to be a new part of the song. And this way you can make the remix parts blend together nicely with your own drop, because it's already introducing a different kind of sound when the remix parts are still playing. And this way the difference is not going to be that big. So again, this is really at your, as your own taste, but so this is nothing else but just the beats that are playing at the drop, but then filtered and bounced, or whatever you want to call it, exported it to one audio file. So this is basically just the same beats that are playing here at the second part of the drop. Let's play them all together. together. It's going to sound like. So I basically bounced this out to one audio file, and I put it, the pre-drop, I put it right here and put some effects on it, like for example, I like to use the Simplon, and I automate it just to make sure that it's going to blend together nicely and that you introduce your own beat, your new beat, to the remix parts. And there's a couple of cool plugins going on here. Like, I really like the new Data Life plugin. They gave it to me. And as you can see, licensed to Nick Rodeville. Team Air. Joking. Anyway, Endless Smile. Really good plugin with only one knob, as Data Life really does well. They only like to use one knob most of the times, and it really gives a cool effect. I can show you what it does. So it kind of filters everything, and it gives an extra delay and a reverb. I don't even know what it's doing, but it sounds really cool, especially when you use it on something towards the drop. Then a Simplon here, just to give that filtered effect. Simplon is a really good plugin to easily manipulate a sound and to give it a filtered sound, give it a filtered vibe. As you can see, it's moving here. But it's basically just changing the filter, so it makes the sound a little bit more dynamic. It's not doing a lot, it's just really frequencies that's changing, and I used a preset here called Old Speaker, and I like to change the frequencies myself a little bit. We have an EQ to make sure that it does not interfere with the remix parts itself, so I like to cut off the highs and the lows, and then it's going to sound like this. And this is what I really liked, is that it really feels like one now. It feels like it's merged together and that it used to be this way. Basically, if a remix sounds like it should be the original, at least it feels like an original and not like a remix, then I think that you have your job done right. You know, it really should feel like one track instead of different ones. So I did the same thing for the pre-drop synths here. As you can tell, it's playing the same thing. It's already introducing my synths to the remix parts, and therefore it's going to be less of a surprise when it drops. So what else is going on real quick? I have the chords playing. And it's basically 3 layers, and it's really easy. It's just the chords of the song. And most of the time, it's just a massive with a simple chord saw or whatnot. I have a Serum playing here. Also pretty new plugin, but it's a really, really good. Same thing here going on, Serum, and it's usually I stack a high octave and a low octave together. And then together, I like to use a lot of sidechain compression to make sure that it has a lot of space in the mix for the actual synths. And then I wanted to look real quick at the bass that's playing, because the bass is also a little bit of a hassle. Right here. So for the bass, I always use a different layer. For the lowest frequencies, for the mid ones, and for the highest ones, and we call them a low bass, a mid bass, and a high bass, just because you want to make sure that you have control over the levels. So if I would pick one bass, then I can only use one volume knob for the entire bass. And I like to have control over the very low frequencies, over the mid ones, and over the high ones. And I would definitely recommend, if you use a sub here, that it's just a very low sine wave or a square wave or triangle wave, whatever you wish. Usually I like to use a sine wave because it's pretty clean, and I usually cut it off pretty high. It's 132 hertz, so it's really just a sub. Again, here it's really easy plugins. It's Nexus here, Nexus 2. It's the EXS of Logic, and I used an own sample that I ever made with the Moog over there. And it's give it like a nice pressure. And it's a very old trick to use a glide at the end of each note, as you can see. But nothing really special. Then there's a mid bass. It's very tricky. If you do a bass, you really want to make sure that nothing interferes with each other, otherwise you're going to have a phase problem in the end. And you can easily check that by just bounce out your bass and see if it changes in volume. They all should be to have the same volume, and every note together should have the same volume in the waveform. And that way you most of the times know that there is nothing going on in your phase, at least nothing going wrong. But that is really just experience. I don't even do that usually, just listen, and sometimes it's also wrong in my songs, but it seems to work at least. The more time you spend on the bass and the kick and how it works together with sidechain also, frequency-wise, the better your mix is gonna sound. Then I wanted to jump quickly to the master side of it. A lot of people think that it's all about the master plugins. I'm gonna open all plugins right now that I have on the master. Nothing secret going on here. Pro L. All right. So this is everything that I have on the master. As you can see, nothing really fancy. I usually start off with a gain because I want to have control over the input of the overall volume. And I added some gain because if I take everything off, it's actually it's already pretty high up there. It's almost 0 dB or minus 0.2. But I added a little bit of gain just to make it almost oversaturate a little bit, but I just like the sound of it. And they always say like digitally oversaturation doesn't sound great. Well, I sometimes like it that it's kind of screaming. It's not as clean most of the times, but I just like the sound of it. So I add a gain to have control over the overall volume. Then I have an EQ, and the EQ is just taking away the lower frequencies. Everything under 41 hertz in this mix was not needed. If you want to use everything, if you want to use it like lower or higher up there, it really changes and it differs per song. So no rules here applied. I would just usually never like use more than, let's say, 50 hertz, because then you're going to lose a lot of frequencies in the low. And you're going to definitely hear that at bigger speakers. Next to the Neve, I have a Pro L, a FEP filter that's not doing that much. It's plus 0.5 gain, and I put it on transparent because I really like the sound of transparent. There's different styles of limiting, and they all have their own personal, let's say, taste. But transparent just does not do too much to the sound, which I really like. I just wanted to limit it a little bit. That's it. Then there's the inflator, and the inflator makes it a little bit louder. And it's kind of an extreme setting, but because the mix wasn't that loud in the beginning already, before the master bus, I had a lot of space and had room to actually to beat the crap out of it, basically. But it all comes back to, you know, like how loud the mix is before the master chain. If I would switch everything off, oh, there's a Magic AB here just to compare it to other songs. It's a pretty nice tool to see how your mix sounds like against other songs. So if I would put everything off, it's pretty much going to sound the same. I put everything on. As you can see, there's not a lot of difference sound-wise, only volume-wise, and a master chain is never going to make the difference in your track. It really is the mix. If your mix is right, the master chain doesn't need a lot. You can actually get away with just an EQ and a limiter. One last thing, and then we really have to wrap it up for this time. I wish that I had more time, but we wanted to do this quite more often, just to make sure that I answer all your questions. One last thing that's really important that I think that works really well is looking at an analyzer. And the one of Logic here is called multimeter, but there's different ones that work well. So you can see what you're doing. If you work in a room that's not as great when it comes to acoustics, you can still make a great mix just by analyzing what's going on in your track. So I would definitely use an analyzer. If you're on tour or if you're working on headphones, you can still really see what's going on an analyzer. And if you learn how to work with it, you can mix quite easily by what you see already. That's it for this time. Next time, we're going to work on a different song, of course. If there's anything you want to know and want to talk about in special, please let us know in the comments. I'm really happy to help and see if I can help you a little bit with getting your song to the level where you want to have it sound-wise. We might going to do this online as well, also live during the radio show. So make sure you subscribe at Nicky Romero TV right here and be updated about everything that's going on. Once again, thank you so much for watching. The next episode is going to be online soon. Take care.